and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and as always, we are joined by the stupendous Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements.
We're so
There you go.
stupendous again. That's good.
Yeah, I thought I was. I thought I'd go with that today.
We're back up in the realms of stupendous.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
I've promoted you again.
Yay! Must be doing something right again, Rich.
Yeah, that's right. We must be doing
All is
something
good
right.
for the world.
Oh, dear.
How have you both been?
Yeah, it's been really well. Good week, sort of starting to get a bit out and about and all that, so it can't be too bad, and feeling positive and hopefully more sort of nice things to come. I mean, the weather's starting to brighten up a little bit, sort of in our part of the world, so yeah, looking forward to things to come.
Doesn't it make a difference? A bit of sun.
It does. It certainly does.
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
It is. What about you, Kerry? I know you've been getting out and about a bit, haven't you?
Back at work, really.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. Meeting people. Public.
Yeah.
Oh,
Meeting the
no.
public again. I know, right? No, it's great. I'm really enjoying being back at work and having a purpose again and earning my money. I like to earn my money.
Yeah.
Very nice of...
Most-
very nice of the government to pay my wages for nearly a year, but no, I quite like to earn my own money, thanks.
Yeah, it gets a bit on top of you after a while, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
I like, and physically knackered. You don't realise how quickly you deteriorate physically when you're not doing your usual routine. Like sitting around for pretty much a year, I'm used to being on my feet, 8 hours a day in the shop at least, and walking here, there, and everywhere and whatnot. That took a toll. I put weight on everybody, and but then getting back to it, the aches and the pains, boys. Oh my god!
Oh, tell me about it. The saga of my push bike, but hopefully I'll be on the road by the middle of the week. So I've just got to sort of tinker about a bit more, sort of. Well,
I'll have to get me massage oils out for you.
Yeah, you will, I think. Yeah, but so I tried to put it together, but no can do. So I'm having to take it to the bike shop, and that'll be Wednesday. So that's going to be fun.
Awesome. Absolutely brilliant. Gotta love a road trip though, guys, right?
Ooh.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
I think we're needing a road trip soon.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's next on the cards, isn't it?
Yeah,
The road
it's chomping
trip.
at the bit, yeah. We'll wait till May, I think, and then I think we can really sort of start to look forward to stuff and actually get out and practically do things, as regards road trips. They will ease the, well, not the social distancing, but your little bubble will be able to expand. So, yeah.
A little, we'll be able to get out together and go exploring on the roads as we used to. Very far-flung places. Now, the roads these days, they're great, aren't they?
Well,
generally. I mean, we moan, don't we? We moan and groan about traffic and maybe a pothole and roadworks and that. But generally, it's quite a smooth ride.
Well,
yeah,
nothing major seems to happen on the roads. Well, what are you getting at, Kerry?
I'm going back into D.
Oh, no.
Oh, we're time travelling now.
We're going back into D. We're going back into the 17th, 18th century of roads. What were the roads like?
This is where you've got to go to try and travel and wave your hands about and wave them around and as you do the
Get my whisk and my can of beans out and time travel back to the 17th and 18th century. Now, roads back in those days were not like the roads, obviously, that we recognise today. What were they like, guys? Can you give us a visual?
A visual that they were just like sort of large muddy tracks, really. I should imagine they weren't actually kept roads as such. They probably would have got a bit better as you got closer to sort of towns and perhaps villages, but actually the arteries linking these places would have been quite wretched affairs to travel on, I should imagine.
Yeah, I should imagine that I should imagine they're like, if you go to like a country park or something, and there's those footpaths that have been carved through the years, through the grass and stuff. And I can imagine it's a bit like that. But not only that, with the houses either side of the street, you've got people shouting out, "Watch out below!" as they throw out all their daily ablutions.
Yeah, have to be careful.
Yeah,
sort of like farmers' tracks, I should imagine. This is probably the closest you can get to what the roads were like, and they would have sort of been in various states of repair, and particularly during the winter months and the wetter months, they wouldn't have been too good to travel on.
No, you're talking in the cities, you would have had more cobbled streets, those sort of things. And when you get further out, as Richard said, from the towns, you tend to go more into like muddy tracks. And they were quite bad. And also, England had a lot more tree coverage than it does now.
Yes, a lot more foliage and, which people don't seem to realise.
So they're not... I would say it would be comfortable travelling.
Well, no.
And amongst all of this, we had highwaymen.
Oh, dear.
We did. Easy targets, isn't it?
Easy target, yeah?
Yeah, well, it would have taken about 4 weeks for the police to get to the scene of the crime.
So by they didn't really have police then.
Well, no.
Yeah, exactly.
Because each diocese would have like a lord of the manor, and he was in charge of like being like the sheriff of the area. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't set up like we know the police force today. We know this because when Jack the Ripper was stalking the streets of London, that was in the very early stages of an actual formed police force. Yeah. So back in the day, there wasn't no such thing as like the police, highway policemen, and stuff like that. So, it really was any man for himself out there.
So when you took to the roads travelling, you sort of had to probably take precautions for your own protection, sort of carry a pistol or something like that, the old flintlock pistols and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Also, you have to remember, people didn't have banks.
Nope.
So they didn't, they would carry chests with their worldly goods in them, or a pouch on their side, or it was in forms of jewellery. Mm-hmm. They would wear a lot more high-class jewellery, that sort of thing. So if you're travelling by coach, then that is sort of easy pickings, right?
Well, you should think so, wouldn't you?
Easy pickings. So the highwaymen were as common as crows from around 1650 to 1800. Now, it's one of those, isn't it? When I say to you highwaymen, I think nowadays we have a very romanticised view.
Well, we do. We have like the traditional tricorn hat, don't we?
We do.
And he probably wears a cloak of some sort, and he has a handkerchief around his neck, which he can quickly pull up over his nose, so you only see his eyes beneath the tricorn hat. And he's a gentleman.
Of course. Stand and deliver your money or your life.
Yeah,
well, I don't know about you, but in my head, I've got adamant.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about the dandy one, so isn't that sort of a bit... what's the word? LBGQT now.
Oh, I don't know, probably, yeah. No, but there is a tradition that highwaymen, I think, as Kerry, as I'm sure Kerry will go on, the romanticised vision of the highwaymen is not quite what they actually were.
No.
So we wanted. Well, when we spoke to Mackenzie Crompton a couple of weeks ago, in Shadows of York, Ghost Walk Lady, we were talking about Dick Turpin. Well, this is what set this off, right, everybody? This is where this came from, because we was like, oh, Dick Turpin. Now, we've done ghost hunts in Epping Forest, right, about Dick Turpin. We'll come on to that in a bit, but let's talk. It set off a rabbit hole, as it does with us. We going any direction. Faith Healing last week, Dick Turpin this week, kind of thing. Now, I wondered where the attitude came from. So in 1737, Abe Leblanc wrote of Englishmen attitudes towards highwaymen, and he said, tales of their cunning and generosity were in the mouths of everybody, and a noted thief was a kind hero. Almost like a Robin Hood figure, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's how it sounds, doesn't it?
It does, like give, take from the rich, give to the poor kind of scenario. And he said, like, that's kind of initially where this romanticized, because even Robin Hood is quite romanticized, isn't it?
Yes.
Living in the forest, nicking off people, giving to the poor because of a wicked old sheriff of Nottingham.
It was a bit more broader than that, because it obviously the legend, I think, was stemmed from Robert of Loxley.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was sent out to the Crusades, and when he came back, he found out that this evil prince had basically taken over land and treating everyone really cruelly, taxing them till they had nothing left. And he sort of thought, well, okay, well, I'm not having this. I didn't go out there fighting for this.
Yeah.
So he come back and he was like, right, I'm going to start nicking from you so I can give back to the community and help them live.
Because they were on their knees because of the taxes from... Yeah.
And then obviously this whole Maid Marian thing got mixed into it, and, so I think that's what sort of sparked it off.
But this is kind of the same kind of attitude that people were having towards highwaymen at the time. Now, Thomas de Quincey wrote that being a highwayman required a bountiful endowment of qualifications, strength, health, agility, and excellent horsemanship, and that the very noblest species of man, considered as an animal, were the mounted robbers who cultivated their profession on the great roads.
Well, there you go.
Maybe these poor villages employed them and said, they put out an advert in the local paper, Highwayman wanted. They had a panel of villagers
interviewing various.
Yes.
And obviously health, strength, agility, and the horsemanship would have to be demonstrated. And they go, "You're hired." This is the original Apprentice.
I think these early authors were trying to make sort of good of what was quite a sort of bad situation. And if you were held up by a highwayman, it was pretty grim. So I think they were just trying to sort of put a lighter twist on highwaymen, just to keep people from travelling, because you needed commerce to sort of still flow. So I think you wouldn't portray the highwayman in too bad a light, otherwise nobody would have travelled.
No, you'd think, wouldn't you? Well, Henry Fielding was actually really concerned about this romanticism, and actually asked Garrick to suppress the production of the Beggar's Opera, which actually made a hero out of a highwayman. So we've got two sides to this. And although there were well-born and well-mannered highwaymen, there was also an awful lot that practised brutality and nastiness in general, we shall say. Violence and rape were common. And when Tom Wilmot had difficulty removing a woman's ring, he was a famous and infamous, should I say, highwayman. He actually cut off her finger. So they weren't this image necessarily. There seems to be like two sides to the highwayman.
Yeah, your literal image and the reality of it all. Yes.
So I kind of wondered why if you was a gentleman, effectively, why you would take to the roads to become a highwayman. And actually this has its origins back in the English Civil War. I actually think we're in one of the most culturally, socially settled periods of history. Our fortunes don't rely on the one thing. They rely on a panel, Parliament, who make decisions for everybody. And we have a very well-established law now, which they didn't back in the day.
No.
When you think about it, we are socially and culturally settled in our place, as it were. It has to be something incredibly drastic to affect our general day-to-day lifestyle.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of like we've sort of reached the end. I mean, they've ironed out all the glitches of history and all the loopholes and stuff. So, as you say, Kerry, we do live. People might argue the case, but at the end of the day, we are quite fortunate in the sort of like the society we live in.
And if you go back in time, when your fortunes, if you was a lord of a manor or something like that, your fortunes could change on the spin of a coin. And one minute you could be rich, and the next minute you could be thrust out onto the streets because you supported the wrong party.
Well, yes.
Quite frankly. Do you know what I mean? There was a lot of civil unrest. We had a lot of wars on the land of people competing for throne or parliament against king. You know, we had a lot of... It was actually paid to be poor, even though the taxes levied on the poor were astronomical, which is where we went into smugglers and stuff like that.
Yeah, which we've touched upon before, haven't we, in a previous show?
Exactly. So when you start looking at past history, you have to take the political landscape into effect and overlay the political landscape of what was happening at that time on history.
Yeah.
You can't look at it through our tinted eyes of today's social and cultural influences. You have to go back. You have to put yourself in the whole circumstance, not just the one bit of history that you're looking at. And this is, I think, some people have difficulty with.
Yeah, they say, oh, that, you know, that wouldn't happen in this day and age. And what goes, well, you're right, it wouldn't. But it did back then. It was quite common. And as you were saying, you know, sort of, and the rise of the Highwaymen sort of principally came sort of as a result of the English Civil Wars. And as you pointed out, Kerry, you know, Parliament won that war. And of course, they got all the riches, you know, all the royalist sort of noblemen and landowners were all stripped of their titles, and they had nothing and nothing. So that's when a few of them would actually take to the road, and and this was sort of like the early stages of highway robbery.
Exactly. The Cavaliers, the royalists.
Yeah.
You know, they had all their estates confiscated. So all of a sudden, they're left with nothing.
Yeah. And back then, you're left with nothing. You know, it's pretty hard today, as you were saying, Kerry, despite what sort of hardships you go through and stuff, which we all do. It's, you know, you have to be very rare to be left with absolutely nothing. I mean, and at the very sort of least, the state will step in at some point. If you sort of lose your job and everything, you get benefits and stuff like that. But back then, you didn't.
No, you were literally left with a horse, the clothes on your back, whatever coinage you might have in your pocket. Once
you've taken away everything that someone has, they've got nothing else to lose. So why not go out and be a highwayman? You know, what's the worst going to happen? They'll put you inside, or, you know... Well, once you've lost everything, you've got nothing left to lose, have you?
Exactly. So even the death penalty of the gallows is not enough of a deterrent. No. Because you're literally fighting for survival here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a Captain James Hind. He was the epitome of a gentleman robber. He actually got caught. He was not a gentleman by birth, but he was the son of a saddle maker. He had a distinguished career in the Civil War. He was also known to help the poor, right? He fought with Charles II. In 1651, he was actually arrested, hung, drawn and quartered for treason rather than robbery.
Right, so he must have been quite a big character during the time, yeah. I suppose helping Charles II, yeah, that would have been a treasonable offence. That would have been Charles I's son, so yeah, it would have been treasonable.
Yeah, you know, when you start looking at this, it's terrible, really, isn't it?
Mm.
Captain Zachary Howard, a former Cavalier, apparently, allegedly, held up Cromwell himself.
I bet that annoyed him.
Yeah,
you can imagine. Upon learning that Lord General Thomas Fairfax was actually sending supplies to his home, Howard attacked General Fairfax's house, raped Lady Fairfax and her daughter whilst Fairfax was away. So there was a lot of resentment and revenge and, you know, against these people. It's, you know, you can't underestimate the effect that this has on people and their psyche. They've fought for a side, they've lost everything. Then you get anger, resentment, revenge.
But they don't seem to be targeting anyone, you know, they're actually targeting their former enemies, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, that they still, so they're sort of fighting their little sort of civil wars are still going on, you know, they're sort of carrying the cause, and they're making their money by robbing the victors.
Exactly. Certain things. I mean, you've got the two sides. Again, you've got different characters that take things in different ways. I mean, Captain Zachary Howard was one that was bent on revenge and retribution for whose loss of things, whereas the other one, Captain Philip Stafford, wore fine clothes, had a final drink at the tavern, promised to pay for it on his way back, and that was on the way to the gallows. Do you know what I mean? All these cavaliers are acting in different ways. But I was also wondering about the roads itself. Like, were there any specific roads that were notorious for highwaymen?
Well, imagine you had the roads that were radiating out of London, wouldn't you? Would have been quite rich pickings on those.
Yeah, you had the Great Western Road.
I think all like the longer roads as well.
Yeah.
Because if you hit them further away from London, it takes time for anyone to get there.
Well, if you look at the four main roads to London were infamous. Okay, so you had the Great Western Road, Hounslow Heath was notorious for it. The Great North Road, that includes Dick Turpin on that particular one. The Dover Road, and there were certain spots on these roads that were always a bit dodge. Gad's Hill, Shooters Hill.
I actually know where Shooters Hill is.
Yeah. But what you got to remember, London was a lot smaller, and these places would have been like Shooters Hill and Gad's Hill and where else? Yeah, I mean, these are all places I recognise, but they're all sort of what I would call in London proper today. But back then, they would have been the little villages and shires that surrounded the capital.
On the Oxford Road, Wimbledon Common, Blackheath, Barnes Common, Bagshot Heath, all frequented by highwaymen and robbers.
Well,
they had good area for that one. Rich pickings there, guys. Salisbury Plain was also noted for its highwaymen.
And that's a fair way outside of London.
It is, isn't it?
Today, yeah. Sort of Salisbury Plain would be sort of where Stonehenge is and round that sort of way.
Yeah, that's it. It makes it easy for them to escape because they can just go into one of the arches and teleport to somewhere else.
Now, in 1658, the established public stagecoach came into force, which is basically the early stage of the postal system.
Yeah.
That was an established public stagecoach, and that gave the highwaymen were like, hey, we've got more people and more parcels in one place.
Yeah.
And although security and transportation had improved somewhat, 1734 the coaches actually began to carry the mail, and although they had greater speed and an increased escort, that was still no guarantee of safety. So, you've got this period in time again where you've got, rather than individuals travelling, you've now got stagecoaches full of people. You've now got stagecoaches that have mail, parcels, rich pickings there, guys, right?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And although the coaches have become better and faster, and they would have a security, you get employed basically to ride in front and behind and to the side and God knows what else, and it's no guarantee. We've got gangs against gangs basically on the roads.
And this is another thing. I mean, sort of, we often think of the highwayman as a solitary figure, but very rare they were. I mean, they would usually operate in gangs.
Yeah.
Very much so. Now, it began to come to an end, the demise of highwaymen kind of came to an end really when the horse patrol around London in 1805 was established, and then it was further boosted by the Metropolitan Police being founded in 1829. So when you look at this, it became a paid public service of police, effectively around that time.
Wasn't the Met established by Queen Victoria and Robert Peel, who was Prime Minister at that time?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah,
and that's why they used to call the police peelers.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
That was in London, but when you had the going on the roads going out and stuff like this, you actually had paid police force now, and so they targeted these things. They targeted these gangs, and so the heyday was over for the gangs, the ruthless gangs that lived and robbed the roads. Now, the last major gang was the Hanham and Cock Road gang. Goodness me. That's a group of 5 men who actually robbed and brutalised residents around the Brislington and Kensham area. And they were apprehended by a police sergeant in 1850. I bet he weren't alone.
I bet he wasn't.
No, I reckon he must have got a mob-handed to pick those guys up.
Yeah.
They certainly don't sound the most pleasing of people to meet.
I think you actually have to also understand that people's brutality was a lot more to the forefront. Nowadays, again, we're culturally and socially unacceptable to be violent and brutal to other people, you know.
Well, yeah.
Hashtag be kind to everybody. But back in the days, when you're living like this, it was a very violent era.
Yeah. I mean, if you were confronted, and the only way out of it was to fight your way out of it, I should imagine.
Yeah, and like you said, what kind of guns? Guns did they have? Guns and gangs.
Guns and gangs. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go, everybody.
We'll add it to the list of right.
I'll just make a quick note of that one.
Yeah. Put it under skeletons.
Yeah, skeletons and guns.
Hospitals.
Yeah.
Just stick to pistols and blunderbusses, my dear. You should be able to get those right.
So then, guns are in their very early stages and quite common.
Yes,
with the flintlocks.
People would have been armed a lot more, so carrying sort of concealed weapons and stuff, because it wasn't illegal to carry a weapon back then.
No, folks, this was a time when it was not illegal to carry a gun in the UK.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Kerry getting mugged by a highwayman? Hang on a minute, let me get my guns out.
Yeah, get the guns out. He might think, oh, hang on.
And he's like, one of these.
I don't know if I would have coped with that, to be fair. I said, have it all. Do you want to rape me?
Oh, dear.
I'm joking, everybody. I'm joking.
Right.
Okay, let's
Carry
talk
on.
about Epping Forest.
Yes, Epping Forest.
Oh,
just
yes.
down where we are.
Yeah, just down the road. Yeah.
Oh, choked on me water. Excuse me. Epping Forest is a place that we go to quite a lot. It's on our doorstep, effectively. Great location. Loads of different areas in Epping Forest to go and visit and paranormal investigate in the dark of night. Love a bit of dark of night in Epping Forest. And it was obviously one of the hiding places for our local highwayman, Mr. Dick Turpin.
Oh, good old Richard Turpin.
God, I love a bit of Rick. Yeah, we're going to call him Rick, not Dick.
Apparently Mary loved him.
Apparently Mary does love him, but we're not going to go down that road. Oh, me water still sitting on my chest, bless it. Now, apparently he had a cave in the High Beach area as a hideout. Now, Richard and I spent an evening while Paul was busy, and we had a look into this, didn't we?
We did, yes, and there have been people actually going to look for it, and they believe they actually have they haven't actually found a cave per se, but they've found a bit of a sort of dugout, haven't they, somewhere?
Mm. Yeah, they couldn't find an actual, like, what we would imagine a cave.
No.
I think everyone goes, oh, it's like a proper cave. It's not. There isn't a proper cave.
Well, you don't get caves in this part of the world anyway,
no.
where we are. I mean, it's probably, or it just could be another sort of romanticised story. I mean, Robin Hood had his oak, didn't he? Perhaps Dick Turpin had his cave. You don't know, but
yeah. And they said that there was a famous pub that he would frequent. A pub, and next to that there was supposed to have been like a shed kind of thing that he'd stable his horse at and go and sort of spunk down in. That could have been classed as his cave, his man cave.
I think
there was lots of things, but these places don't exist now.
No.
So
Dick Turpin had his own little man cave. So, like, he had his PS3 up there and...
yeah, swivel chair,
Yeah, he was holed up in his little cave. No, they can't find it. They found a dugout. That's now no longer existing, and that's been flattened and it's been built on. So, unfortunately, no cave, everybody. Unfortunately.
Right.
However, the area was still a really great place as a hideout where you could ambush unsuspecting travellers. Now, he's quite a romanticised figure these days. We've had plenty of films about our Dick. And I'm not going to be able to get through this without my mind hitting the gutter. I'm telling you now.
That's right.
He's got this very romanticised view. TV series, who remembers the old Dick Turpin TV series?
Richard O'Sullivan, who I think you had a bit of a crush on at the time, didn't you, Kerry?
I did, yeah. Richard O'Sullivan, big crush at the time.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, and he's often appeared in sort of films and stuff, isn't he? So, yeah. TV
well before my time.
Mm-hmm. I know, well before your time. I can't believe you don't know that series. It's brilliant. Anyway, in real life, he was actually covered in pox scars, even. He was he tortured people, horrible, and he would if he just to get his own way. He did it if he felt like it.
Yeah.
He was a generally horribly nasty person.
It was a nasty piece of work to come across. Yeah.
He was evil. Evil, I say. In 1737, an actual bounty was put on Richard, so he lived in the forest for a while before fleeing to York to evade capture. Now, this famous ride we're going to go a bit more in depth into his life, but the famous ride on Black Bess, did he even have a horse called Black Bess, Richard?
No, by all accounts.
More on that later, everybody.
Yes,
we will go into that in more depth in a minute. Did he actually do the famous ride from London to York on a horse called Black Bess that he didn't own?
Well, obviously not. Now, you ruined it for everyone listening now.
I know, I am sorry, everybody, but that is not what happened.
It's not what happened at all.
Not what happened at all. He was eventually caught in 1739, found guilty of stealing 3 horses. Funny enough, one of those 3 horses was black, and he was sentenced to death and hung by a former member of his old gang, who was actually offered a full pardon for doing it. So, You kill Dick, you get a pardon.
Yeah, we'll let you off, yeah.
But where did all this start for Richard Turpin?
Well, wasn't he a son of a butcher?
Well, he was born in 1706 in Essex, and he was the son of John Turpin, who was a small farmer and a sometime keeper of the Crown Inn. Some people say he was born in Thaxted, others name Hempstead, but whatever, it's in this area.
Yeah, it's round the Essex area, isn't it?
They think he probably served an apprenticeship with a butcher in Whitechapel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Whitechapel in those days was actually a village on the fringes of the capital.
Yeah.
But during this apprenticeship, he conducted himself in a loose and disorderly manner.
Oh, so he liked a bit of good time then, back then.
Yes, he did. His apprenticeship was over, so he opened a butcher's shop and he began to steal sheep, lambs and cattle to put the meat into his shop. So he poached.
Well, we have a bit of a poacher then.
He was actually caught in the act of stealing 2 oxen, and he fled into the depths of the Essex countryside to save himself.
Oh, so that is sort of, yeah, you can see a bit of a pattern starting to grow now, can't you? So he's got the taste of the life of crime, and now he's actually on the run. So the authorities, so the authorities actually are after him. So yeah, it's not a huge leap, is it, for him just to continue his life of crime?
Exactly. He resurfaced whilst trying his hand at smuggling and didn't prove very good at that either. Before long, customs agents compelled Turpin and his gang to lay low. Now, most people think of Dick Turpin as a lone highwayman, but for the majority of his actual criminal career, shall we say, he was actually a member of the Essex gang, also known as the Gregory Gang. Now, members of Turpin's gang are known to have included Thomas Barnfield, Mary Brazier, John Fielder, Jasper Gregory, Jeremy Gregory, Samuel Gregory, the Gregory brothers, Herbert Haynes, John Jones, James Parkinson, Joseph Rose, Thomas Rowden, Ned Rust, William Saunders, Richard Turpin, and Humphrey Walker and John Wheeler. So they're the members of the gang. There may have been others, but they're the ones they know.
Yeah, Christ, what a gang.
Yeah, it's quite a big gang. That's like a mini village on the road, isn't it?
Yeah, you'll definitely see them coming, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Now, they used to target, this gang of people, used to target even isolated farmhouses. So they would go around and do that side of things more than highwaymanship.
Yeah,
so they would
break and entering, isn't it? Sort of house robbers, weren't they?
Yeah, they terrorised, and tortured. They did torturing people into giving up their valuables. Now, in Loughton, in Essex, Turpin heard of an old woman who was rumoured to keep at least £700 in her house. Now, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Back into it, dear. That's a lot of money. When the woman gamely resisted all of Turpin's efforts to discover the money's hiding place, he hoisted her into an open fire until she gave up her treasure. So he thrust this old woman into a fire.
Yeah, it's quite a famous incident, and there is a woodcut of that. I mean, I'm sure if anyone wants to go online and have a look at that, there is a famous sort of picture of it, I think, that was circulated at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you thought it'd get ahead of Hansel and Gretel.
I wonder how it would have been if they'd actually crossed the two mythologies over together.
That's right.
Well, there's an experiment right in itself.
There's a film ready to be made. So although they weren't actually doing that, they were just doing farmhouses, and that was their speciality. Yeah. But towards the end of his career, that's when he actually got involved in highway robbery.
Right, I think, the noose must have been tightening round the Gregory gang.
Mm. Now, they managed to rob their way around the home counties, so they moved around. I mean, you're not talking they've got a house they live in. They're living off the land. They're going from house to house, from county to county, doing this. And, torture, as I said, was very, very prevalent in these encounters. In 1735, the London Evening Post regularly reported the exploits of Turpin and the Essex gang, and the king himself offered a reward of £50 for their capture.
All right.
Now, eventually, local constables, constabulary I went with in my brain, and then tried to say something different, captured two of the gang, and Turpin himself narrowly missed capture by bursting out of a window. He headed back to East Anglian countryside and lived rough for a while, and then began working with Captain Tom King, who was actually one of the best-known highwaymen of the day.
Yes, I've heard of Tom King alongside Turpin. I wasn't too sure the connection, but I've heard of Tom King, the highwayman.
Mm-hmm. So this is where we've got Dick Turpin coming from, like, poaching into living rough in a gang, robbing cottages and lonely houses and stuff like that. They've got a really bad reputation. They don't care basically who they hurt, what they do, as long as they get their money. And now he's lost his gang because things are going bad there. You know, the noose is tightening, as Richard so eloquently puts it. And he goes and teams up with Tom King.
Yeah.
Right, now Tom King himself has this swashbuckling, devil-may-care kind of character. So he's got a different kind of reputation to Turpin.
Yeah.
This is where it becomes blurred.
Yeah, it makes you wonder whether a lot of Tom King's attributes were actually sort of overlaid onto Turpin.
Exactly.
Mm.
And that's what I think's happened. They blurred the two characters together. Now, this is where the cave thing comes in too. Yeah. Because the cave in Epping Forest is a dugout, or was a dugout, which they could watch the road without being seen, right? Yeah. So that's where that comes from. And even like they didn't care, actually. They would even go for the local peddler.
So they'll rob anyone.
They're robbing everything and anything, basically. Because even the peddlers started to carry weapons for protection.
Yeah. So even so, it's sort of like a couple of guys you wouldn't want to meet on the road.
Exactly. Now, in 1737, Turpin had achieved such notoriety, another bounty was actually placed on his head of £100.
It's slowly increasing.
Yeah. It actually transformed him from being a common footpad into a murderer.
Right. So they obviously did murder whilst he was with Tom King then.
Well, on the 4th of May 1737, a gamekeeper named Morris actually tracked Turpin to Epping Forest. But when he challenged him at gunpoint, Turpin drew his own gun and just shot Morris dead. So this is where it comes from. Yeah. So that's why it went to murder.
That is the incident that he became, a common thief to an actual, a murderer.
Star Wars Day, that is May the 4th.
Is it?
Yeah, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that's why it's called Star Wars Day.
Silly old me. Now, it seems now he's getting reckless because one night whilst on the road to London, he actually took a fancy to a very fine horse that was ridden by a man called Major and actually forced him to exchange it for his own horse, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Major didn't take the loss lying down. He issued handbills around the pubs of London. He liked his horse, obviously, described the horse, wanted his horse back, named Turpin as the thief. The horse itself, so we're now getting into horses, the horse was traced to the Red Lion pub in Whitechapel, where Turpin had stabled it. Now, Tom King came to collect the horse that was stabled, because obviously you've got the couple going through. So you've got one doing the deed, one getting rid of the goods and whatnot,
and the other going to pick it up. Yeah, it all sounds sort of they're trying to loosely sort of cover their tracks, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Tom King goes to collect the horse. He was actually arrested. Turpin, waiting nearby, rode towards the constables holding King, fired at them, tried to save his mate, basically. However, he was a dreadful shot, and he killed King rather than the captors. Whoopsie!
Yeah.
Soz, mate, tried to save you, messed that up a little bit. He seems a bit crap, doesn't he?
Well, I'll give Dick Turpin his due. I mean, sort of pistols and stuff, and you had to. They were not that accurate. You virtually had to fire them at point blank range to actually hit the person you intended the bullet to hit. So you can give Turpin his due. I mean, he did try.
Well, King was a bit upset about this.
Oh, so he's very trying.
Yeah.
Before he died, he actually gave the constable sufficient information which forced Turpin to again live rough in Epping Forest. And he realised that he couldn't stay uncaptured for very long if he stayed in London.
No, because they knew, obviously, his MO, and that by then I should imagine the authorities would have had Epping Forest quite well covered. It probably would have been a bit hazardous for him to actually stay there.
So he went off to Yorkshire.
As you do.
As you do. Just poodled off to Yorkshire. He settled under the name of John Palmer, his alias of John Palmer. Where does the name John Palmer come from?
His mother's maiden name was Palmer, and John was just, well, you call yourself John, don't you? It's a bit like calling yourself John Smith, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know two of them, funnily enough, John Smiths.
Oh, right.
Now, to finance his lifestyle, he frequented excursions into Lincolnshire for more horse and cattle rustling. Went back to his roots, basically. Occasionally highway robbery, but nothing major, not like he had been down in the London area. But he was mainly looking at horses and cattle at this point. Now, bless him. One day he returned from an unsuccessful hunt. He shot the landlord's rooster. When the landlord complained, he threatened to kill the landlord as well.
All right, you can just imagine the landlord sort of running out of his house going, "You've shot my rooster."
And Turpin go, pretty annoyed.
Typical Essex person, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
You can imagine he was like fed up. He'd not been successful on his evening excursions. He's got this poxy rooster going off in the mornings, and then the landlord having a complain was the end of the straw for him.
You can imagine it, can't you? You shot my cock. Like,
Dick shot my cock.
Yeah. Good old Dick.
Oh, bless his conscience.
Yeah.
He was actually taken into custody while the local authorities made inquiries as to how exactly Mr. Palmer made his money, and then inevitably learned several outstanding complaints outstanding complaints made against John Palmer for sheep and horse stealing in Lincolnshire. So they're all starting to talk to each other now, these constabularies.
Yes, so they're obviously, because I think, it was clever of him to actually go over the county lines, because I think sort of back then there was a sort of lack of communication between sort of counties and sort of parishes and shires. But now you can sort of trace sort of there's a network building up and communications becoming key here, and it's certainly the communication that seems to have done for poor Mr. Turpin.
It certainly is. He was actually put into the dungeons of York Castle while he was being investigated, basically. And it would have been all right, actually, if he hadn't have written a letter to his brother requesting him to procure an evidence from London that could give me a character that would go a great way towards my being acquitted.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Turpin's brother was mean and tight, and refused to pay the 6p postage, so returned the letter to the post office.
Ah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, this is where coincidence and karma step in, I feel.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, wasn't he, when the letter was returned to the post office?
Because his former schoolmaster, another Mr. Smith, saw it, recognised the handwriting.
Yeah.
He took the letter to the local magistrates and with his permission opened it. It was signed John Palmer, but Smith identified the writer as Dick Turpin, and Smith was subsequently dispatched to York to make a positive identification, which he did.
You can imagine when he walked into the prison cell going, "Hello, remember me?" You think,
And Dick Turpin was probably, oh, God.
Oh, no.
I'm done for. He was convicted on 2 indictments. He was sentenced to death. Pleas from his father to have the sentence commuted to transportation fell on deaf ears.
Yeah, no, they were determined to put an end to him, weren't they? And I think quite rightly so, to be quite honest, even though the original indictment was just, theft of a couple of cows or so. I mean, they would have taken his other stuff, his reputation, into account.
Oh, exactly. And this goes across, like, you've got all the stuff that had happened in London, you've got all the stuff that's happened in Lincolnshire, you've got the stuff that's happened in York. He's got a good reputation as Dick Turpin, no matter what label you put yourself at. John Palmer, Dick Turpin, it's still not very nice. Now, the laugh of this is, right, whilst he was in his cell, he actually had visitors, lots of them.
Yes.
He was able to buy new clothes and shoes. He hired 5 mourners for 10 shillings each.
Yeah, that's right. And I think even his jailer sort of earned about £100 during the time that he was captive as well, sort of getting people to come in and have a look at Mr. Turpin. I mean, he was quite a celebrity.
He was a celebrity.
I want to know how Dick Turpin's brother can sleep at night, knowing that because of that sixpence, he sentenced his brother to death.
I don't think he cared.
He probably didn't care.
That's bang out of order.
Well, I bet that caused
his
a family
brother.
rift with his father.
That's his brother.
Mm.
Blood thicker than water and all that.
Not in these days, it wasn't.
Not in this day and age.
He ain't heavy. He's my brother. Did not come into play.
Well, I'm Karma Comfrey's brother as well.
I don't know. I didn't look into his brother, to be fair.
No.
Yeah.
On the 7th of April 1739, Dick Turpin rode through the streets of York in an open cart, bowing to gawking crowds. At York Racecourse, he climbed the ladder to the gibbet and then sat for half an hour chatting to the guards and the executioner. An account in the Uke Courant of Turpin's execution notes his brashness even at the end. And I'm going to quote, "With undaunted courage looked about him, and after speaking a few words to the topsman, he threw himself off the ladder and expired in about 5 minutes."
Well, there you go.
End of Dick Turpin. Now, we know from Mackenzie what happened after his death. He got buried and then got dug up.
Yes, sounds like he was dug up by the grave robbers, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Given to the physician. They found his body, reburied him, but the grave you see is just a memorial rather than an actual grave site. But he is in that churchyard. He's just not known where exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, good old Dick Turpin.
Yeah, so's the life of Dick Turpin.
Yeah. So why do we have this very romanticised vision, of him? Why do we have this?
Yeah, for most people, I mean, Dick Turpin would, sort of name a highwayman. It's Dick Turpin, isn't it? And there would have been, I don't know, sort of after his demise, I mean, his sort of story would have taken. It's a story that any sort of novelist or sort of playwright or even your journalist hack would grab on and sort of. And once he had been executed, that's when you can start to embellish it.
Exactly. Now, his reputation was basically established in 1739 with the book Life of Richard Turpin and sealed with a novel called Rookwood in 1834 by Harrison Ainsworth. It was dauntless Dick Turpin with his horse Black Bess as the secondary character. That's where Black Bess comes in. Ainsworth's description of an epic ride from Westminster to York caught the popular imagination and basically turned Dick Turpin from this notorious, rough, violent character into the romanticised vision that we have today.
Yeah. I like what it says. It wasn't your average pot boiler. It turned it into a runaway bestseller.
Exactly. Over the next 50 years, replays of Turpin's story reappeared in many magazines, cheap novels, ballads, and as we always know from our Penny Dreadfuls show that we did, he appeared in those too. So this metamorphosis of Dick Turpin, who is a housebreaker, torturer, murderer, horse stealer, highwayman, basically nasty piece of work, turned him into highwayman and knight of the road, and this romanticised vision that we have now. And I just think this is just, bless him, he was infamous in life and famous in death.
Oh, yeah, and even to this very day, people still sort of raise an eyebrow whenever Dick Turpin is mentioned. He'll be recognised,
He certainly will.
Under what guise he is portrayed, like we sort of talked about, is sort of like the true Richard Turpin, and you've got the fictitious as well. You've got two Turpins.
You've got two Turpins
for the
indeed.
price of one, yeah.
Yeah.
Two for the price of one.
Yeah.
I wonder what he would make now of the story that is told about him.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, he sound, yeah, he'd probably
turn in his grave.
have a wry smile, I think. Oh, good, they're still talking about me.
Exactly. Now, on that note, we're actually going to take a quick break. And when we come back after the break, we're going to have a look at a couple of other, should we say, infamous characters from the Highwayman days. And if you're wondering, how does this relate to the paranormal, then you're going to have to stay tuned to find out that too. So just take a listen to this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PA UK radio network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network.
Get your teeth in, me dear.
Oh, why does
How long have we've been working for them? And like,
I know. How long have I podcasting for now, and I still can't speak properly?
We'll start calling you Irene.
Bless her. So we talked about Dick Turpin. We bust-mythed a few of the old myths that surround our Dick Turpin. So should we have a look at another one?
Yeah, that's
because I don't really know too much about any other Highwaymen.
You and me both, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of, only sort of Dick Turpin and Tom King were the only two that would spring to mind for me.
So do you reckon then me and you should just head off to, do whatever and then carry on with this bit?
Go on, Kerry. So who have we got next?
We're going to talk about John Rann.
Right.
Now, that's not a name that springs to mind, is it?
No.
He was also known as 16-string Jack, and he was actually one of the very first criminal celebrities.
Oh, right.
He was very good at marketing himself, I think is the expression, because he knew very much how to garner the public's interest in his life and his crimes.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he was very good at it, because I've never heard of him.
Well, at the time, he was well known. However, what he wanted to put out there and what actually was put out there was a little bit difficult. And it's very difficult. This one's a very difficult character to actually work out the truth from fiction.
Right.
Okay, so you've got like very contrasting perspectives on this one, which is what I find very fascinating about this period and this particular character. So we don't know where he was born. Again, we've got contrasting accounts of his early life. Now, these appeared in pamphlets that were published after his death. So in the first one, which is a general account of the life of John Rann, alias 16-string Jack, it says he was born in a village somewhere outside Bath, so we're down that end of the country.
Yeah, West Country way. Mm-hmm.
Poor but honest and industrious parents, peddling goods in and around Bath. When he was 12, he was taken into the care of a lady of distinction who happened to be in Bath for the benefit of the waters, very famous waters in Bath. I fell into the bath there, the Roman bath there. Anyway, different scenario. Anyway, while he was in this care, his mistress became fond of his mistress's servant. So he then moved to London rather rapidly. He was employed first as a stable hand at Brooks Mews, where he was described as honest and industrious, and then became a coachman to several different noblemen. But some of the men he served were less than honest. In fact, this was later used to explain his descent into criminality. In about 1770, Rann became coachman to a wealthy merchant who lived near Portman Square. He became this man's favourite, was given money, allowed to dress far higher than his rank allowed. And although it was, the dress, this is where, his reputation comes from because of his extravagant dress. Mm-hmm. He wore silk stockings, silk breeches, and the breeches had 8 silver-tipped strings on each leg below the knee.
Oh, right. Hence 16 strings.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And then basically the pamphlet finishes saying that Rann had gained many female admirers, named one specifically of Catherine Smith.
Right.
Right, so this sounds like, that sounds quite an easy transition, shall we say, through life. However, account number 2 provides a very different account. It describes he was born in Hanover Square in London. His parents were criticised for not having educated John to any degree. Rann was apprenticed as a coachman at the age of 14 to a Mr. Dimmock of Grosvenor Square, described as honest and held in the most grateful acknowledgement and regard by his master. This pamphlet emphasises that Rann was only a common hackney coachman and specifically says that some other pamphlets are mistaken in thinking he ever served a nobleman, like the previous pamphlet we've just talked about.
Well, yeah.
Now, this particular pamphlet notes that Rann's womanising contributed to his growing criminality. The women identified as his lover is named as La Roche.
Ooh, yeah, a little bit of a French twist there. Oh.
Sounds like a James Bond villain, doesn't it? La Roche.
La Roche.
Yeah.
It's very different accounts. One where he grew, born and grew up in Bath, it's all very, starts in London, goes to Bath, gets taken by a distinguished woman and sort of like becomes a well-to-do kind of character and only goes into criminality through when he comes back to London and is a coachman. Whereas the second account is similar in regards to he becomes a coachman.
Yeah, those are the two sort of areas where it is actually similar, and he is sort of thought of as in high regard as well. There seems to be both accounts say he's quite diligent at his work as well. So.
And both accounts suggest he's womanizer.
Yes.
Yeah.
He likes the ladies, this one. Raw. Now they
surfing did as well. By all accounts.
I know, right? Randy little so-and-sos. Now, both pamphlets allege that he started off by picking pockets.
Oh, a cut purse, eh?
So he met Fagin en route.
Obviously, he did.
Yeah.
They say he was quite successful.
Right.
And
he had loads of pockets by the end of his career.
Well, by his clandestine practices, he was enabled to appear in all the dress of a gentleman. He became an extravagant dresser, wearing all manner of colourful garments.
Right.
Unfortunately, this didn't really work for him because it helped victims identify him.
Do you reckon he was the inventor of those vests with lots of pockets on?
Who knows?
Pinched the pockets. If he nicks pockets, he's like sewed them on his vest.
I don't know. You have a weird mind.
Jokes are wasted sometimes. They really are. Oh dear.
You carry on. Our audience might understand that better than I did, clearly.
Yeah.
Well, you said he was a pickpocket, so he picks pockets. Yeah, so he must have lots of pockets to put on his vest. Never mind, Kerry. Carry on.
Terrible.
You should have said cut purse. He wouldn't know what you're on about. Anyway, carry on.
Okay. On that note, as I'm watching Friends at the moment, the word I'm searching for there is anyway.
Anyway.
He was actually caught pickpocketing the pocket of a gentleman and brought before Sir John Fielding. Now, Fielding apparently wanted to commit him, but no prosecutor could be found, so Rann went free. Now, this occurred 3 or more times, and the cases never came to trial, so there's no record of them.
Right.
Fielding's own records were actually destroyed in the Gordon riots just prior to his own death.
Right.
So we can't track it from there either.
Mm-hmm.
Fielding did manage to have Rann sent to Bridewell on one occasion after Rann robbed a horse in Hill Street, Berkeley Square. However, once again, Rann escaped from being charged due to the prosecutor not being positive as to the identity of the person.
He's got a lot of luck on his side, this one.
He's quite lucky, this one.
Yes, isn't he?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. On another occasion, Rann was committed to Bridewell, suspected of robbing a coach on Hounslow Heath. But again, the prosecution couldn't identify him.
He should quit now, I think.
He's like, well, hey, my luck is holding. I'm going to keep going. Now, while he was in Bridewell, Rann actually befriended some other criminals.
As you do.
As you do. Now, these were also set free due to lack of evidence. They included William Clayton, Nathan Jones, and James College. Now, James College was apparently also known as 8-String James.
Oh, right. So all the strings are coming together now.
Oh, we love the strings. Now, the pamphlets vary in specific details. They agree that after his time of Bridewell, Rann then turned to highway robbery. And the genuine account states that after robbing a coach on Hounslow Heath, Rann and his accomplice Tim Guard Collier actually attacked 2 graziers in Smithfield. The graziers fought back. Rann and his accomplice eventually won the day. Then didn't get a lot of money from that. And whilst you imagine this, right? He's having his tussle with these 2 graziers, and Rann and his accomplice win, nick all the money, and say, "Have a good journey," as they walk away.
Yeah.
You know, he was that kind of character. I think he was one of those that he knew luck was on his side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, there are lots of unverified claims concerning these crimes. They imply that Rann was a substantial criminal career before he was finally brought to trial, but we don't actually know that much.
No, it seems, a little bit about his early life again, which is, there's 2 separate accounts, so, and his sort of, his time spent only briefly in the clink. On a few occasions, and this sort of robbing of the graziers at Smithfields.
Yeah, I met a few people. I mean, there is, this is a theme that runs through, but at least they were waiting for the prosecutor before they went ahead with the trial. You know, you do sometimes wonder if they even bothered. They did, obviously. On the night of Saturday, the 13th of November in 1773, John Rann, along with David Monroe, William Davis, alias Scarlett, John Saunders and John Scott committed a spat of hold-ups and robberies in and around the Hampstead area. They were arrested by John Clark and Richard Bond for actually being disorderly as they sat in the 3 Tons pub in Soho.
Oh, right, so they weren't actually sort of, you can imagine it, can't you? They're gone on their robbing spree and they go, right, let's go down the pub now. They're getting a bit rowdy down there. Yeah, you can understand it.
One of Rann's accomplices, John Scott, a tin plate worker from Rupert Street, was admitted as King's evidence by Sir John Fielding, who looked upon him to be an honest man. He was in working dress. Scott deposed that on the 27th of November at around 6 p.m, the group robbed a foreigner on foot in a field leading to Hampstead, but only gained some farthings and halfpence. Right. The group then moved on to rob some gentlemen in a coach on his way to London near Chalk Farm. Monroe went to the side of the coach and was given by the gentleman inside 1 guinea in gold and 6 shillings and 6p in silver. Despite the success of this, the group continued to attack another man standing by his horse. That man had no money and offered the group a handkerchief, which they declined. Who do you mean I am? Dick Turpin? Not Dick Turpin, Dick Whittington.
Yeah, you can have me hanky. Yeah.
I've got this. Is this any good to you? No. Now, one final act on this particular night, the mischievous group went to a field, fired off 2 of their pistols. That's when they then decided to go to the pub, right, in Soho, to divide the money. Now, we learn about this particular night's happenings from the trial account. Now, this came before the Old Bailey on the 8th of December in 1773. So this is how come we know all this, right? The group was in the 3 Tons. The men who were in the coach, Robert Simmons, Joseph Davies and their driver, Thomas Shedd, informed Sir John Fielding of what had occurred. Fielding then dispatched two of his Bow Street runners to deal with the situation. Right? So it's now starting to get a bit funny. Clark and Bond surveyed the road where the robbery had occurred. They found no one on the road. Like, they're going to stick around, right?
Yeah.
It's like a horse has bolted on that one, guys. They're not going to sit there and go, woo, he's just wait now.
Yeah.
Terrible. Anyway, they then decided to search the disorderly houses. #pubs.
Pubs, yeah.
Right, they called them disorderly houses. Maybe we should rename them.
Yeah.
I'm going down the disorderly house. This included the 3 tons where Rann and his group had been since 10 p.m. in a little room behind the bar, because you could hire a room out back in those days as well.
Yeah.
Clark searched David Monroe, found some shot in his pocket. Bond also found a loaded pistol in the room, which Scott claimed was his during the trial. Right? The group were discharged as disorderly and taken to Fielding. Now, without Scott's evidence, it would have been impossible to link the crimes to this group.
Right.
Because the only thing they seized was actually a pistol and a sword that was alleged to have been wielded by one of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they've sort of like, they've grabbed these guys just on a disorderly charge, not actually anything to do with the crime that they were actually investigating. There's no evidence.
So what they essentially done was that they had a boring night one night and thought, I know, we're going to go and nick someone for disorderly. Where can we find them? Oh, I know, let's go to the disorderly house where they all congregate. So they all went down there, nicked a few people that were in there, and they just got lucky.
Yeah.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, these 3 look like, or this lot look like a likely group of lads. Let's grab them. It's exactly it. This is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So the evidence that they found, there was nothing to actually link them to the crimes that they were actually investigating at this point.
Mm.
Right? The crime they were tried for was actually the robbery of Robert Simmons, who was a vintner from Hampstead. That was the £1 3 shillings 6 pence guy.
Yeah, that was the guinea guy, wasn't it? Yeah.
Now, Simmons claimed the group behaved exceedingly civil and rather begged for the money than actually used any violent means. So we're not talking, except that this seems like lads going out and just trying their hands.
Yeah, just chancing their arm a bit, isn't it?
Yeah. It's Shed, the coachman, testified that even though one of the men pointed a gun at him and threatened to blow his brains out if he did not stop, when he desired him to put the pistol down, he did and behaved exceedingly civil.
Mm.
This could be why they have such trouble with people sort of like identifying Rann and his accomplices, because they're civil, they're not extra violent or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they go, oh, it was really nice to me when he robbed me.
Yeah.
You know, the trial collapsed actually due to difficulties in making positive identification of the culprits. So I do think that's in play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was nice to me. We weren't beaten up. We were just asked for it and then gave it and off they went.
Yeah.
Said thank you very much.
And there was a sort of, and at the time, you know, because there was a sort of like people wouldn't be too keen to sort of offer too much information, and if they knew the culprits were going to be hung for it.
Exactly. You'd feel guilty. Yeah. Even though you're being robbed, if you do it in a nice way.
Yeah, the chances are your accusers are going to sort of go lightly on you and say, well, I didn't recognise who it was, but he was nice.
Yeah.
Or maybe they knew where they lived.
Or you just, I don't, yeah, maybe there was that. But Simmons actually said that although it was light, he could not observe their faces, nor could he remember their address. So again, they're sort of trying to put this crime on these people, and they're not getting anywhere.
They're not getting anywhere with the witnesses, are they?
Shed couldn't identify the men either. Even Davies struggled to maintain that the man he saw was Monroe. He said, I'm not positive. He answers much to the person. It was only by starlight.
Yeah.
You got to remember, no traffic, no street lights.
Well, no street light.
Maybe if they were ravaged by the Highwaymen, they were also after CSA, the kids.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, they all maintain, all these 4 men that were caught in the 3 ton maintained their innocence, right? All but Rann brought character witnesses to attest their honesty. So they've got mates who are good mates. Rann's only defence was to say, I know no more of the matter than the child unborn. He said this a lot. He repeated this in a subsequent trial. And, basically, I'm innocent.
Yeah.
All 4 were acquitted of robbing Simmons, and Rann once again was acquitted in the subsequent trial for the robbery of Davis. No evidence for this at all, but Fielding has got the bit between his teeth now on these.
Yeah. He knows what's going on.
He ain't stupid. It's just trying to pin him down.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, dear. The pamphlets do provide further evidence of trials which led to acquittals, which do not appear in London Lies, but Rann does appear, along with Catherine Smith, in a trial 7 months later for the robbery of John Duval. Rann was charged with highway robbery of a watch worth £10 and 7 guineas in money, and Smith charged with receiving the stolen goods. So she's his fence, basically.
Right, yeah.
Okay. When arrested for this crime and brought before John Fielding at Bow Street, Rann entered the office with more audacity than was ever observed in any other person in the same circumstances. I think he was a bit like, hello, Mr. Fielding, how are you doing today?
Hello, it's me again, yeah. Good luck, yeah. Trying to
Nice to see you at the pub the other night. Shame you weren't nicked for it, but...
Try getting me on this one.
Yeah.
His irons were tied up with blue ribbons. He had an enormous bouquet of flowers affixed to the breast of his coat. And when he was being questioned, his answers seemed rather calculated to convince, the people that was questioning him that he possessed a matchless share of effrontery. Basically, he was too cocky for his own good and came across more guilty than innocent.
Right.
Yeah, you still get criminals these days that like that, don't they? They like to, tease the police and stuff. Even wasn't it like the Yorkshire Ripper and that? Didn't he used to leave messages for clues to see whether or not the police could try and track him down?
Yeah, when you look at when they profiling.
Yeah.
They say that serial killers like to sort of be part of the action, as it were, after the event and stuff like that. So they look in crowds and at funerals and all sorts of things because they're likely to turn up in the crowd and whatnot. So it's quite common for them to observe the crowd rather than the people initially linked to it, as it were. So, but he's got cocky. He's been acquitted so many times. Lady Luck is on his side. No one can touch him. Right?
Yeah.
He was actually committed to Newgate to await for trial. Newgate prison. We know how notorious that was. And whilst in his previous crime, Rann had been accompanied by 4 men, he now only seems to have one partner who actually remained unidentified throughout. So although Catherine is his fence, she's getting rid of the goods he's stealing, his gang has now whittled down to one other.
Yeah, just him and one accomplice, yeah. Okay.
Now, Duval testified that on Saturday, May the 21st at around 9 p.m, somewhere around the 9-mile marker between the city and Hounslow, he was accosted by 2 horsemen. He gave one man 7 guineas, the other his watch. But it was so dark, I could not distinguish even the colour of their clothes.
Right.
Following the robbery... Well, again, if he's done it in a nice way, Duval's probably thinking, oh, God,
Yeah.
Following the robbery, Duval had his watchmaker, John Alam, advertise the missing watch with a reward of 4 guineas for its safe return. And a woman named Eleanor Roach, identified in other accounts as one of his mistresses, brought La Roche, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bond villain.
Mm-hmm. She bought the watch into Alam's shop, and as was proved in court, it had the same number on the back as the receipt that Duval possessed.
Right.
So she got caught doing the old passing it along.
Yeah.
Roach explained how she obtained the watch and in doing so indicted that Rann was responsible for the theft. She stated that she had been at Catherine's the night the crime had occurred. On that night, see, Catherine and Roach are sort of like, one's his girlfriend, one's his...
Bit on the side, yeah.
Bit on the side. But they're all it's all like quite incestuous, should I say. She'd been at Catherine's the night the crime had occurred. On that night, Catherine told Roche that Jack had gone out upon the road to get her some money. Roche acknowledged to the court that she understood that this meant Rann was out stealing, right? Because that's what he does, right?
Yeah, and there's no ATM machines at that period of time.
No. With her interview with Sampson right before the trial, she had been far more explicit, saying that she was told he was gone out to rob on the highway. So she changes her account a little.
Right.
She told the court that Rann returned by coach at about 10 o'clock and ran up to Smith's bedroom, gave her the watch and 5 guineas. That's what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rann was arrested. Smith's lodgings were searched by John Fielding's runners, and to avoid the watch being found, Smith handed it to Roach, who was hiding the watch under a cushion. Didn't search it very well then, did you, boys?
No.
They didn't spin the joint,
yeah.
Roach was actually quite angry at Smith for giving her the watch since it had been found. She might have been brought into danger. Basically, she's saying, you've given me this watch, it's hot property, police are after it. So, and in response, Smith expressed her love for John, defended her actions by saying, as you do not live with him, if I had given you 50 watches, you could come to no harm. Basically, go away.
Yeah.
He's mine.
That's it.
So,
Cool.
After John arrived that evening, Roach left the house with the watch and then took it to Alan's shop. Stupid girl.
Yeah.
Oh.
But this is where it all comes down to. Now, the trial itself all comes down to Roach's testimony, which was portrayed as being motivated by ill will she felt towards both John and Catherine. So this is like a passion thing.
Starting to get jealousy drawn in and stuff like that. You can see where it's going now.
Hell hath no fury than a woman scorned.
Yeah, and that's going to be his undoing, surely.
That was the defence that Rann used successfully to prove his innocence. He stated he had known Roche for a long time and argued that she probably acted out of malice, as she often had applied to me to take her. I had refused.
Ooh.
I don't think he did.
No.
He said he had sometimes let her have things. I gave her some shoes. And he finished his defence by concluding, it is all out of revenge because I would not keep her. Oh,
dearie me, yeah. Spite in the face of the other one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Smith and Rann have joined ranks big time against Roche on this one. Now, Smith claimed that she received the watch in payment from an unnamed gentleman she had met in the Strand. The gentleman took her to a tavern and, having no money to pay, left the watch in her care until he came back with money. She claimed that Roach had extorted it from my maid with whom I left it in case the gentleman called for it. So they're taking responsibility out of this and putting this on an unnamed stranger in some pub that she'd met. One wonders if she may have been a prostitute.
Yeah.
And basically paid her by giving her a watch. Yeah. That's what they said. Now, both of these defences worked. Rann and Smith were both acquitted. Rann played to the gallery throughout this. He cultivated a growing reputation for his behaviour. According to one pamphlet, he came into court adorned with blue ribbons, an enormous bouquet of flowers underneath his coat. He's very flamboyant. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And everyone's saying I kind of think it's probably more what Roche has said. She's in on this gang of fencing, got jealous, got told that she weren't nothing to the man she loved and wanted to bring them both down. I think that's probably a true reflection. He did the crime. She got the watch defence, decided that if I can't have you, nobody can have you.
Yes.
Kind of moment. Now, this is, again, acquitted.
Okay, again.
His confidence is very much on the boost there, isn't it?
He's got to come across as soon.
He began to boast about his crimes and say, I have so much money, I shall spend that, and then I shan't last long. He actually predicted his own death before Christmas.
Right.
2 or 3 days after that acquittal, he was on Bow Street trying to climb into the window of an unnamed woman. In doing so, he attracted the attention of a watchman who seized him and delivered him to guess who?
Mr. Fielding?
It was Sir John Fielding. I bet Fielding is like, I'm going to get him.
I've got him now.
Yeah.
The unnamed woman came forth in his defence, saying that he could not be charged if he was only trying to get into a place where he knew he'd be a welcomed guest. He would have readily gained admission had she not unluckily fell asleep. So basically, she's saying he climbed in the window because I didn't open the door.
Yeah, sort of like you drunk and stop out, you can stay out all night then.
I know, but this is an unnamed woman, so this is another woman.
Yeah, well.
Poor old Catherine. The Sunday following...
Maybe he was a good-looking bloke, and all these women thought, oh, if he does get in, well, hey.
Maybe he made them laugh.
Probably,
yeah.
With his flamboyancy. Sometimes you don't need to have good looks, do you? You have to have charisma. And it sounds like he has bucket loads of charisma.
Mm.
He reminds me, actually, of the Scarlet Pimpernel.
Oh, I see, yeah. They see him here, they see him there.
He frequents the boudoirs of many women. The Sunday following, Rann apparently appeared at Bagnigge Wells, which was a fashionable spa, dressed in a scarlet coat, tambour waistcoat, white silk stockings, laced hat, etc., etc., and declared publicly, I am a highwayman, he said. He then got drunk and fought with local men. And then, apparently later, he found himself again in a debtor's prison, this time on Fleet Street, for the sum of £20 of unpaid bail money. He was visited by a great number of ladies with easy virtue.
Oh, dear, prostitutes,
Yeah.
And soon after these visits, his debt was paid, and he sounds like a gigolo. Forget them being prostitutes; they were paying him.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, he sounded like he was on a nice little earner, regardless of any sort of. He sounds like he didn't need to turn to robbery to make a income.
All these women are quite happily paying for him to come out.
Yeah.
Charmer. He was regularly described as inverting notions of social order. On one occasion, he was in a public house on the Tottenham Court Road when 2 sheriff officers entered with a right against him. Rann was unable to pay the debt, but 2 of his friends offered 3 guineas and Rann gave him his watch instead. This came to more than the amount of debt, and Rann persuaded an officer to buy the company a bowl of punch with the surplus.
Do you not mean a writ as opposed to a right?
A writ, a right, whatever.
A writ, yeah, a right, yeah.
One of them, anyway. A warrant. We'll go with warrant, shall we?
We go with warrant, yeah.
All right, yeah, I can say that better.
Yeah.
So again, you know, I've paid off this warrant. You've got more money than you needed, so buy me some punch. Buy me and my mates a bowl of punch, right? With what you've got extra. He accused the men of treating him in an ungentlemanly fashion, and after the officers left, he simply rode up the road, robbed a nobleman, replaced the lost sum.
Right. That's how you do it, isn't it? That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Another occasion, he appeared at the races at Barnet, dressed like a sporting peer of the first rank. God, this man. He also apparently went to Tyburn in a coach and rode into the constable's ring requesting that he might have a good view of what passed because it was proper that I should be a spectator on this melancholy occasion.
Also, he'd like to go and watch the executions as well.
Oh,
yeah.
he was top proper gouting everybody.
Yeah.
But they can't pin anything on him.
Yeah.
Bless.
Yeah, that's certainly how you do it.
I know, right? This is one of those where the policemen go, they are oh, we're going to get him. We're going to get him.
Yeah.
Because he's cocky with it.
Yeah, he's not making any friends, is he?
Well, not in the constabulary, he isn't. Sounds like he's really good friends with a lot of other people, though. Lovable rogue and all that.
Yeah.
3 months after his last trial, Rann appeared again at the Old Bailey in October of 1774. He was tried with William Collier for robbing the Reverend Dr. William Bell on September the 26th. The two men were tried alongside two women who were accused of receiving the stolen goods. Eleanor Roach, now a defendant rather than an informer, and Roach's servant, Christian Stewart.
Oh, so they've got the two people that probably would have been loyal to them actually in the dock as well. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Dr. Bell testified that on September the 26th he was travelling to Gunnersbury, and at 3:15, as he was riding through the town of Ealing, he noticed two men, both on horseback, riding very slowly, one behind the other. Bell thought it looked odd, and after putting his spectacles on, investigated, and he noticed that one of the men had the flap of his hat let down all around, probably without strings, and a red handkerchief upon it. He described the man riding behind, clothed in a lightish coat, a hat flapped bound, a great deal of black hair hanging loosely about his head, and his horse was something of a kind of brown. And he also said that his boots were shorter than boots commonly are and very dirty. Now, we're talking about a man who is noticing details now. He is not vague now.
No, he's black hair. He's recognised sort of, sort of their attire and everything. He
said that he didn't suspect that they were highwaymen. He thought there was something strange, but didn't suspect anything that nefarious. He rode on. About 1/4 mile down the road, he heard the noise of the two horses. Then he found himself between the two horsemen, one of whom he instantly recognised as the man I passed first at Ealing Town.
Right.
The men then asked him for his money. Bell stated he was hesitant at first until one of them motioned towards a pistol and threatened, "I will blow your brains out." Bell searched his pocket, found he only had 18 pence.
Right.
But whilst looking, he held out his watch in the other hand. The men took both the money and the watch and then rode off. John Caldey, a pawnbroker from Berwick Street, testified the same day that Dr. Bell was robbed. Roach and Stewart came to his shop at about 8 or 9 p.m. and trying to pawn a watch. Caldey asked how they had acquired this watch, and they answered a gentleman left it with them. Caldey said that he could give the pair no money from the watch unless he saw the man. Caldey deliberately let the women go, as he knew where they lived, and after they left, he went straight to Sir John Fielding's. Sir John Fielding rubbed his hands together with glee.
Right, yes, call out to the constabulary. We're off.
Yeah, there's a lot of grassing going on, isn't there?
Oh, no honour amongst thieves.
No.
Caldey and some of Fielding's men went to Roach's house, where they held the two women until a constable came. They searched the house and found the watch. There's a lot of watches in this.
Yeah.
Which during the trial was confirmed as Bell's. They also found a pair of dirty boots.
Oh, the boots. It was
The boots.
The
dirty old boots. Now, this is the focus of the trial. This is the only way of linking the men with the stolen watch to the crime, right? The boots. Blanchfield Clark, one of Sir John Fielding's runners, had found the boots and stated during the trial that they were quite wet and dirty, as if they had been worn that day.
Right.
But the most crucial piece of evidence concerning the boots came from William Hill, who was a postboy of Princess Amelia. Hills first gave his evidence in an information on the 5th of October, when he said he was in Acton on the day of the robbery and saw John Rann riding through with another man at about 10 minutes past 3. During the trial, Hill was asked if the other man was Collier. Hill was unsure. He said, "I did not take particular notice of their clothes. I know Rann by sight very well."
Right.
When asked about the boots, he said their boots were very dirty. One of their boots was rather shorter than the other, and that confirmed Dr. Hill's earlier evidence.
Right. So.
Bang to rights.
Yes.
Yeah. It does sound like it, doesn't it?
All on the boots.
All on a pair of boots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another man testified for the prosecution was a guy called William Halliburton, who was another of Fielding's men, who he had stayed at Roach's house after the others had returned to Bow Street. At about 10:15, Rann and Collier came back to Roach's house, only to be caught and tied up by Halliburton, who had been waiting for them. So it then links them to the house.
Yes.
Where the boots were.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in previous crimes, Rann had escaped through the absence of identification. Now, Fielding had deliberately invited Dr. Bell to Bow Street 3 days after the crime to identify the men. During the trial, Bell was asked 4 times if he believed Rann and Collier were the men who robbed him. Bell was sure that Rann had robbed him, but less so of Collier.
Mm.
Right, he said, I would hardly, from the nature of things, say it can be so equally clear, but the remarkableness of the person of William Collier is so very great that I think myself very clear.
Right.
The final piece of evidence against Rann came from Hannah Craggs, who lived in the same house as Roach and Stewart. Now, Craggs gave information before the trial. This is recorded in the Old Bailey Sessions papers. Craggs stated that the morning of the robbery, she let Collier into the house. She also saw Roach bring 2 horses outside the house at about 11 or 12. She saw a man. She identified him as Rann, paid for the horses. Craggs also was asked to describe the appearance of Collier and Rann on the day. Though she did not remember the former, she said the latter was dressed in reddish-coloured clothes.
It's all come together now, isn't it?
It certainly is. He's on the downward spiral.
Yeah.
She was asked about the colour of the horses, and though she was not quite as confident, she stated that one seemed of a blackish colour, the other rather brown. Matched Dr. Bell's testimony.
Yes.
During the trial, Rann appears very flamboyant again. He wore a new coat and a waistcoat of pea green cloth. He was so confident of his acquittal, he began to organise entertainment for himself and his associates after the trial. Once again, he starts his defence by saying, I know no more of it than a child does unborn.
Right.
But this time, Rann felt the need to expand his defence. He stated he had never seen Dr. Bell before and essentially sought to cast doubts on the identifications. Reflecting public interest in the case, Rann's plea was a motive enough to be printed literally everywhere.
Yes.
Collier's defence was to deny everything up to the point at which he went to Roach's house in the evening, only to be arrested by Halliburton. Roach's defence echoed Smith's from a previous trial, offered an alternative narrative. She said 2 men had come to her parlour, dripping wet, covered in dirt. Roach offered them clean clothes, and for payment they gave her the watch.
Okay.
She said, if I had known the watch was stolen, I should not have offered it to a pawnbroker I had dealt with a great while. Ooh. Basically, Stewart's defence was largely a reiteration of Roach's story. She argued she did not know who the men were. She went with Roach to pawn the watch only because she was a good servant. Right. So they're all sort of like denial.
They're trying to distance themselves from one another, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
They're trying to save themselves.
Exactly. Stewart's defence was actually the only successful one. She was acquitted. Both Rann and Collier were both found guilty of highway robbery, sentenced to death. Unlike Rann, Collier was recommended for a royal pardon. Roach was actually sentenced to 14 years transportation, and in December was sent to America on the Justicia. Whatever ship that's called.
Yeah, whatever ship that is, yeah.
One pamphlet claims that following his conviction, Rann became penitent and regretful of his life of crime. Another said that his behaviour didn't change after the sentence. whilst in Newgate, not less than 7 girls pined with him. The company was very cheerful.
Mm-hmm.
And Rann was described as insensible to the dreadful situation his crimes had brought him into.
So, he was quite happy to the end by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rann was actually executed on the 7th of December 1774. So LaRoche, the spurned lover, ends up in America.
Yeah.
Collier was pardoned and Rann was executed.
Right.
So, yeah. Luck ran out, I feel.
Yeah, sounds like it.
The case actually, attracted a lot of public attention. There were 2 portraits of him published as well as 3 pamphlets. In one print, he's depicted as young with curly hair, fashionably dressed, wearing a shirt with a ruffled sleeves and a neckcloth. He's got this, again, he's a lovable rogue, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he certainly comes across as that, doesn't he? I mean, sort of like he's relatively well known, and people just sort of, I can imagine, we've probably all known people like this, and you think, oh Christ, and he's been up to this again, and have a little chuckle about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's that kind of character.
Yeah,
and it sounds like they weren't particularly violent. They just did a lot of robbery.
Yeah, Jay just committed a lot of robberies, yeah.
The Ordinary of Newgate, John Villay, described him as a straight of a genteel character and making a very handsome appearance. He did stop short of calling him a gentleman.
Right.
Oh.
James Boswell called him a fop, implying that his behaviour was effeminate and pretentious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So you can see why the ladies liked him.
Yeah.
Now, men weren't the only people that were allegedly highwaymen. We looked at Catherine Ferris. She's she's accused of being a female highwaywoman, basically. But there is no particular evidence that Catherine ever was a highwaywoman. There's a lot of, mythology or legends surrounding her. Apparently, she donned men's clothing, became a highwaywoman. She did this in the company of a lowborn lover. And while she was committing one of her crimes, she was shot and rode home, basically, and died of her wounds on the steps of the family home in Markyate. But when we looked into Catherine, what did we find out, Richard?
Well, she was born into wealth anyway, and there didn't seem to be any particular sort of reason for her to actually sort of go into highway robbery. I mean, it is, she's certainly an odd one. I mean, although she crops up, I mean, I certainly don't believe the story.
No, what happens basically is her family all die and she's left. She marries somebody else who whittles away the family fortune and sells actually Marryate House, which her family owned, I believe it was. And, during this period in time, they reckon she took to highwaywomanship, as it were. But there's no evidence of that.
There's no evidence whatsoever, There's not even any anecdotal sort of evidence. I mean, I don't know quite how this story has made it into the canon of highway robberies and, of great highwaymen.
I mean, her family has definitely had property at Markyate.
Yeah.
But she probably never lived there, certainly wasn't a resident at the time of her death. This is where she's supposed to have gone to have died on the steps of. But again, even that, there was varying accounts of it. One say that she went up to the bedroom and died in her bedroom of her wounds that she had, shot wounds that she got while she was doing a highway robbery. Another say she died on the steps. But her family didn't own the house. That had been sold a few years before. Yeah. So she wouldn't have gone there anyway.
That's right. There seems to be a lot of inconsistencies in the story. You know. Yeah, I don't know quite what to make of it.
Isn't the whole mythology that she was a highwaywoman attributed to a book, though?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that sort of thing going on, especially with what's the other one? It's a place down in Cornwall, Devon. The inn.
Jamaica
Inn, yeah. Because
the
that
Daphne
was
du Maurier, yeah.
That was all associated with the book. Obviously, the ghost story is associated with the book. So, I would have thought it'd be something like that.
Well, the historical novelist Magdalene King Hall came across the story of Catherine and actually adapted it for her novel Life and Death of the Wicked Lady Skelton. That was published in 1944. Now, this is where the historical Catherine Ferris becomes Barbara Skelton, and that's where the bare bones of this legend are embellished and make her into something she never really was. Historical fact doesn't back it up at all. But people say that she is one of the most notorious highwaywomen in that area at the time. I mean, again, we've got films about this, released in 1945. There was a film, it was the highest grossing film at the British box office in 1946. There was another film made in 1983 starring Faye Dunaway and Alan Bates about this story. So, it becomes settled in your psyche, doesn't it, about this infamous highwaywoman who, tragically dies after being poorly treated by her husband. She then takes to highwaywomanship and gets shot in these endeavours.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of material there for a novelist to write a good old-fashioned Argus saga, isn't there?
Yeah, gotta love them, right? An Argus saga. Did you come up with these terms?
Well, that's what they're called, aren't they? These sort of long, rambling sort of books set in the Georgian period. They're called Argus sagas. You sit by you sit by your Arga and read them at night. You have the Arga.
I need to get myself an Arga.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
and a rocking chair.
That's right.
Yeah, go for it. Then you'll need is the slippers, the blanket, and the eyeglasses.
She's got
all them. I can even put my hair in a bun.
Yeah, there you go.
So you have to be very careful. You have to look at, the historical fact is twisted so often by, we've talked about this so many times on this show. Fact from fiction, isn't it?
Oh yes, I mean, I think if anything, this show, and it's one of the good things about this show, we can sort of like take the story, and sort of really sort of just peel it back down to actually its bare sort of roots, and hopefully our listeners actually do get something out of this, than just sort of like the standard story. We've done it a bit with the Gunpowder Plot, didn't we? And we've done a few other shows, The Smugglers as well. There's a romantic sort of bent to the smugglers, which didn't really exist, because these were people you didn't particularly want to get involved with, or sort of upset in any way.
Or you're in cahoots with them.
Yeah.
And whole
remember the village that was so plentiful of gin that they washed their windows with it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, various periods of history and how we view them now through the eyeglass of media, effectively. Books and films and TV series and stuff like that. We very much have a very different viewpoint of those times in history. I find it fascinating how we now view it. These characters are not nice characters. We've looked at one very nasty character in Dick Turpin. We've looked at, Rann, who's the flamboyant, the gentlemanly, give us your money and no harm shall come to you kind of thing. We've seen the play out between, the authorities trying to pin down these characters. I mean, you're not talking forensics and, what we have today.
He very much reminds me of Sergeant Wilson from Dad's Army. You can imagine
probably.
him. Would you awfully mind, giving you my money, your money?
And then a completely fictional case of Catherine Ferris. It's not backed up in historical fact at all. It's just this whole thing is just, again, I go back to during the summer, living in a forest, going back to nature, doing the odd robbery just to get enough to live by, and it is a very romanticised view. Imagine doing that in the winter.
Yeah.
Or when it's raining and it's muddy and there's no berries on the trees, and there's the local wildlife is hibernating or not around.
That's right.
And,
I mean, it was
it's
very good
not
life.
quite so romantic, right?
Yeah. So that's the tales of the good old highwaymen.
Yeah, but they still evoke that.
Yeah. And
they
they
still
always
evoke,
will,
don't they?
And
this is why, because they're so deep in our psyche. Sorry, Andy Masser. Because they're so deeply ingrained through media, basically, from the penny dreadfuls all the way through. When we go ghost hunting, it's easy to overlay that reference to any strange phenomena that you may come across. I mean, how many people we've done it? Epping Forest, right?
Yeah.
On the trail of Dick Turpin.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not where he died.
No.
Wasn't there for particularly a long period of time.
No, just spent his youth there.
Yeah, I think most people buy into the legend of his cave that's there.
That's not even there.
Exactly. But then that's what, you get people where they're ghost hunting. They hear the legends, they want to go and see if it's true, sort of thing, and they don't care. They don't look into it and look at the research and go, well, actually, it's not there at all. That was made up, but we're going to go anyway.
Yeah, they take it from Most Haunted did it, right?
Oh yes.
Do you remember that night where they got lost in the Epping Forest and they had to have a forester come and dig them out of the forest? On that particular, I think that was a live event they were doing
one
night. Possibly, yeah.
And then they did the inn. Most of these people, you could hire a room in an inn for a night. They'd have somebody you spend the night in I say hotel. It's not a hotel, is it? In an inn. A lot of these inns now no longer exist. The ones that do, the history in those places is probably, if you could read the fabric of a building, there's probably a lot more interesting characters that haven't hit the history books in quite the same way these characters have, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Fascinating. However, we can't knock these stories. These stories are what puts meat on the bones of history. Although it's not particularly accurate what we're fed, it's kind of the reasons why we do things.
Of course it is. I mean, who doesn't like a good sort of story? I mean, we like them today just as much as people did back then.
I agree. I agree with that.
Totally.
The thought of a woman scorned by her, mistreated by her husband, and then takes to the roads with her low lover to recruit. Oh, that's brilliant.
It's good.
Perfect. It's just amazing. You can't knock it. I mean, when we did Epping Forest, we tended to, we was actually more in the craze area, the gangland of that era, the 1960s era. A lot of nefarious things took place in the certain area of the forest in regard to gangland murders and stuff like that. And that's why we were actually in the forest that particular night. We was looking for ghostly occurrences and strange, weird wonders of EVPs and whatnot to do with that. And that was very interesting. It was very interesting. But straight away in the group we were in, somebody brought Dick Turpin up.
Yeah.
Now, the Epping Forest is massive.
Well, yeah, it is a large piece of forest land. Yeah, it sort of borders each side of a road that cuts through the middle, isn't it?
Yeah,
Well,
it's massive.
It's massive now, but back in the day, it would have been even bigger.
Yeah, exactly. So the area we were in was actually not an area that would have been frequented anyway. But straight away, Epping Forest, he is very much like the modern, nowadays, people view him very much as like people go, oh, he wasn't a very nice character. He wasn't a nice character. We're not just talking like a little bit naughty. We're talking nasty, violent, didn't care at all. There was no compassion, no empathy. Whereas John Rann, he's the complete opposite in character.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, where you've got these two different things. This is born out of a political and social situation that people were thrust into from the Civil War going forward. It only lasted about 200 years.
Yes.
This Highwayman thing, it's, again, it's only a couple of hundred years that this went on for. It wasn't an extended period of time.
Yeah, it's when government became more centralised and stuff, and sort of like the rise of the police force and stuff like that really did put the death nail on the sort of era of the Highwaymen.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Love it.
Yeah, really.
Love it. Love it. It's a bit like, right, everyone's got, now I was talking to a lady today about the Witchfinder General.
Right.
And, again, a lot of misconceptions about that character.
Oh, yeah, sort of Matthew Hopkins, yes.
Yeah, a lot of misconceptions about him. And a lot are not known. When you're looking at old pamphlets, old court scan scripts, you're looking at, when you go and try and research in depth and find historical fact, sometimes there's massive gaps in, records that you can go to at the records office. You can find a lot out. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of gems out there to be researched and found, but there are massive gaps, aren't there?
Yes, but particularly around the case of Matthew Hopkins, yes. His sort of notoriety and stuff is sort of quite embellished, because there is actually not a lot actually written about him, which is the odd thing, but quite a lot spoken about him.
Yeah, reputation. Again, isn't it? Well, on that note, we've actually come to the end of the show.
Oh, right. That's another quick one.
Yeah. So these subjects go so quick.
It does go quick.
Yeah.
It does go quick. But I will say this. I like doing these kind of shows because it does kind of, okay, so you could argue we're on a paranormal channel, it's not paranormal. I argue that many people go out paranormal investigating on the back of these kind of stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're definitely right. I mean, these are sort of like these stories that sort of attracted us to the field in the first place.
Exactly.
And they deserve to be sort of retold from time to time, just to make sure.
Reminder.
Yeah, it's a nice little reminder.
And isn't knowledge power?
Well, at the end of the day, of course it is.
So if you're out in the field and you're out on the trail of Dick Turpin, for example, then you know the story. You know then if what's coming through on your spirit box or your app or whatever it is that you're doing, that you may not actually be talking to Dick himself. You may be talking to somebody different, and not to blinker yourself into the belief that what you're getting is purely Dick Turpin. There's no references, no actual proof that Dick Turpin is haunting in it everywhere. Anywhere, should I say. There are encounters of people reporting ghostly apparitions of what you would class as a possible highwayman, but there's a big broader spectrum out there beyond the highwayman scenario.
Yeah.
So don't get blinkered into it, is what I would say.
Definitely.
Even down to Black Bess. I was shocked at that when I found that out.
Good old Black Bess.
Good old Black Bess, no historical reference at all.
Yeah.
He owned a horse called Black Bess. I didn't know that.
No, I didn't. I always thought his horse was Black Bess.
Yeah. Well, that's because that's what the history books tell. Oh, not the history books, the pamphlets and the penny dreadfuls and the stories that we're told about him. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I don't want to take away the the joy of these stories. I think they're brilliant. You know, I love the story of Dick Turpin. I don't like the character, but I like the story of him. I still like the thought that he's rode, should I say, from London to York on one fell stint on a horse and scaled the walls of York. After all that riding, she managed to scale. I love the idea that a horse could do that. It can't. Physically impossible for it to do. If you've seen the walls of York, you'll understand what I'm saying on that one. And you only have to watch the Horse of the Year at Olympia that they do to realise that that's just not a possibility. But it's a great story. But take it for what it is. And if you're going to go and do paranormal researching, then at least do the research behind it.
Yeah.
Before you jump to the assumption.
Yeah, that's the least you can do.
Yeah. Right. Any news?
We have a new blog up on the website, www.paranormalconcept.com.
Oh, great. And they can go and listen to all our past shows, which are up there.
Yes.
And plus our 2 publications. What is it? The Book of Parasearch and our latest, which is Paranormal Concept Extra.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want something to read, go over there and you will be taken over to Amazon, I believe. Is that right, Paul?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
For all other shows, check out Spreaker, Paranormal UK Radio, and you will find a plethora of different shows all about the paranormal, the UFO, cryptozoology, supernatural, occult. Oh, goodness me, a whole beautiful mixed bag of paranormal content for you to digest, quite frankly. Over there on the whole channel, but obviously we're the best, right?
Right, of course we are.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we are the best. A lot of people think so we go with that.
Oh my God, and we're now hitting the John Rann kind of arrogance. Love it. Right, on that note, we shall bid you a farewell. We will be back next Tuesday. Go over onto the socials. Paranormal Concept on Facebook. We will be releasing a competition this week to win a copy of said book. So go over there. Don't forget, if you like what you hear, share it with your friends and spread the word. On that note, we bid you a good night.
Good night, everyone.